Aye.
Where you want to jump to first? 173?
Sean is going to come join us here.
You should turn your
we can hang
microphone
off
on because
on
we're
the 4K community
recorded.
partner discussion just for a couple minutes until he gets here. But yeah, we can go to letter E, the Fund 73 investment update. So with that, one of our board policies, 6144, says that I gotta provide an update to you guys here. So it's probably been a little while since we talked about this. So our Fund 73 is where we store our money to pay for teacher retirement benefits. So if you're a new teacher that's hired today, we put $1,000 aside in your name that you can accumulate over the entirety of your career, up to a max of $30,000. So we have various tiers of teacher retirement benefits, but a lot of companies or municipalities will have these retirement benefits that they don't set money aside for. So when the money comes due, they have to carve it out of their operating budget. We have always proactively set money aside to pay for this liability when it comes due. So because we get this, we get an analysis done every 2 years that measures what the liability will ultimately grow to and how much money we need today to be fully funded. And we were really close to being fully funded. So rather than chasing large investment returns and getting kind of risky with the investments that could have a negative rate, we've always invested really, really safe, more or less just put it on deposit with Citizens Bank. So it works like a bank deposit plus a little extra according to the agreement that we have with them. So I just want to kind of demonstrate here. This is the red line is the S&P 500 from July 1st of 2021 through through September. And that's in the red line there. So the stock market has been up and down quite a bit. So cumulatively, it's negative over the last, 15 or so months. We've always stayed above zero, so our investment has never shrunk. It's gotten a little more positive here over the last 3 months in particular, so interest rates are going up. Well, I guess the point I'm making is that by being like uber conservative on our investment, we've never lost money. We could have chased greater returns, but since we're fully funded, why? And I think this just kind of validates the long-term decision-making of previous finance committee members here. Good timing, Jill. So good decision-making along the way over many board members has really protected almost $6 million of the community's investment. So we can always change our strategy and invest this differently, or we can just leave it as is with Citizens Bank. So a lot of local governments, like the town of Mukwonago or the city of Racine or whoever, can invest their money at the local government investment pool. They call it LGIP. The LGIP is operated out of Madison, and they work to just basically get a little bit better of a rate of return, and they keep it those investments really safe, just like the one we have. Our agreement with Citizens Bank is whatever LGIP pays, they'll pay that plus 10 more basis points, or another 0.1%. So rather than take our money to go to LGIP, which we could do, they kind of do it a little bit better that way. So we should be doing this update every quarter. I think we've gotten away from that a little bit, so I just want to bring that back. You guys have any questions on that?
No, that's good.
Good.
Okay, good. All right, the next one then, director's report. All right, so this director's report I just want to summarize 3 things here, and I'll do this here maybe every other meeting here and a little bit more down
Hey, Sean.
Down the home stretch here. So in the director's report, there's 3 things that I want to comment on. I'm going to go to the screen here real quick and show these exhibits here. So every 2 weeks when we run a payroll, I will run an export from our financial accounting software and create these exhibits. So here is Fund 10. You can see we have first line of employee salaries, then employee benefits, then purchase services, so on and so forth. So we have a $61 million budget here. We've expensed almost $16 million or encumbered. Encumbered means we've committed to the purchase. We just haven't written a check yet, or we're waiting for the goods to be delivered. But basically $16 million is spoken for. We have another $45.4 million remaining in the budget. We're about 30% of the way into the school year, so we would expect about 30% of the budget to be used, or 70% of the budgets to remain. So salaries and benefits are 75% of the entire budget, so I highlight those in yellow because those are the biggest line items far and away. But I create these just to communicate with principals and department directors how much money they have left, And then this, what we're looking at here is just an overview of the entire district. So right now we have, I'm looking right here, we have 74% of our budget remaining in Fund 10. So we're in a good spot there. Fund 21 is our donations account. So we just, when we get that money donated a certain way, we spend it. So we just guess approximately $150,000 will come in throughout the year. I'll answer any questions you have. I'll just stop on Fund 27. Fund 27 next to Fund 10 are really our two biggest funds. So again, we have 73.2% of this budget remaining, and we're 30% of the way into the year. So we're in good shape. This exhibit here would highlight any major issues if we're spending too quickly or if there's something wrong. So I just use this to do an overall snapshot of how are we doing at a 30,000 foot overview. So then that's the first area I just want to report on here. The second part then is our salary and our benefits here. So I'm just going to kind of shrink this down a little bit here. So here's our 11th payroll that we just completed last week, Friday, okay? So if we take a look, and I'll make that just a little bit bigger, I can compare this to where we were at our 11th payroll in the prior years. So we're always about 31 or 32% of the way into the budget after the 11th payroll. And then if we just fast forward to the previously completed years, we can map this out to say, you know, if we're here and we ended there, can the past history tell us, and can we predict where we're going to be? And we can, like with at least some degree of certainty. So when we look at our Fund 10 salaries, we are doing good. I feel pretty confident saying at this point, we have 11 payrolls down, 15 more to go. I think we can call from here that we're going to be under budget when the end of the year comes. So we'll have some leeway in the budget to maybe put money aside for building projects with Andy Wagner or some other year-end budget decisions like we've done in past years, but there is no reason to sound any alarms because I really see no statistical information that would say, hey, we're over budget, we're spending too fast, our budget wasn't big enough, or any of those kind of reasons.
But there's still a lot of open positions to fill.
And support staff, yeah, there's some. And then further, there's also, you know, there'll be some support staff vacancies that they call in sick and there's no sub that will take the job, so there's naturally going to be some savings there. So yeah, that does explain some of the reason why, you know, we're under budget. I spell it out that if we have a 1% savings in Fund 10, that's 390 grand. So 1% savings on salaries and benefits combined. That's 390 grand, and a 1% savings in Fund 27 is 94 grand. So really, a 1% savings is $500,000, and a 2% savings is $1 million. I wouldn't be shocked if we were 2% under budget. I'd rather be 2% under than over. But you know, I don't want anybody to be alarmed if we're $1 million under budget. When we've talked, you know, the budget's tight, we don't, you know, there's reasons why we stay pretty conservative in all that we do, but there are savings that occur that we don't plan on, and then we'll have the opportunity to figure out how to use that surplus at the end of the year if there's anything to do. So
Does subbing come out of that same budget, or is that a separate pool of money?
Say that again?
Subbing, for all the subs, where is that?
It comes out of a different pool. So we set aside about $600,000 to pay for subs, and that would be under Stephen Williams' human resources budget. I'm sorry, I should probably be talking to the microphone here. Are we on? Okay, apologize for that, for all the viewers at home. No, but that's in a different budget.
Okay.
Okay.
How do we do with that last year, with that budget? Because there was an increase in subs? Or I assume we had an increase in subs, right?
I'd have to go back and take a look at it, but I felt like we weren't majorly over. We set a budget, and that's kind of guesswork. You're never really sure how much subs you're going to need.
Yeah.
You can always look at your history to say what are the historical costs, but I don't want to answer that question and make something up, but I don't have any reason. I don't remember seeing anything that was like, wow, we really missed it. So we set a budget, we lived within it, but I can come back and bring that to you.
Was that something that we were allowed to use our ESSER funds for as well? For if we had teachers out for so long, say to quarantine, and we had all the extra subbing, did we use ESSER funds for some of that?
Yeah, but we never did. We never had to do that.
Okay.
But we could have, yes. So I just kind of show this exhibit here to show that we're tracking just fine. And then find the last exhibit that I have here just kind of shows us in our true cash position how much money we have in the bank from month to month. You could see in November, so our books, the most recently completed month we have this for right now is September. We'll update this here for October. shortly here. It takes us about 30 days to close our books for the prior month. So in November is really where we hit our low water mark for our cash position. And then in January, you can see that we spike up. That's when our property taxes get paid to the municipality, and the municipalities then deposit those in our bank account here. So what I aim to do over the next couple months here is just to take a look at what our available cash position is, and to make some similar short-term investments that are absolutely safe and guaranteed to never go negative, so like certificates of deposit and things of that nature. But we'll take a look at maybe using our cash position to make some interest while we have the money, okay? But if the finance committee or the school board wants to know what is our wiggle room, it's gonna be defined by this graph right here. So our low water mark here, we've improved our cash position, and we have intentionally done that here. Should we ever need a bond rating to borrow money in the future, our cash position really is something that creditors and rating agencies will look at. So we've improved that, and we're well positioned to deal with any type of situation that might come our way, be it a new roof or whatever. We already have some money set aside. We have additional funds set aside in Fund 10 here that you're seeing that, so should something come up, we should be able to handle it. Do you guys have any questions about any of that information? I guess the point I'm making here is that we're in a good spot right now. There's no reason to be alarmed. Budget looks good.
Thanks, Tom. State referendum results?
All right, so state referendum results in November 8th, we had elections. So I just want to bring back some of these results here for the committee to just be aware of. So much like school districts, we have our $10,000 per member. That's our revenue limit. Towns and municipalities, counties, they have the same type of limits where they can only raise their tax levies by the amount of net new construction. So if the town of Mukwonago wanted to increase their budget, they would be limited by whatever percent net new construction spoke for the growth that they had in their limits there. So you're much like school districts, you're seeing a lot of towns, villages, cities, and counties going out to referendum, and you're seeing a lot of success with those as well. So this past November, 18 out of 23 municipal or county referendums were approved. So about 78% were ultimately approved. Altogether, when you look at the April and the November municipal referendums, 80.6% passed, so 4 out of 5 passed. So we saw that here locally with our fire departments, not only in the town but also in the village, both passed to increase their emergency medical services. So that's an example of state-imposed revenue limits and a referendum being necessary to help, have the money needed to do what they need to do. So likewise, then school districts were kind of in the same boat. 64 out of 81 referenda questions were passed, so that was 79% here this past November. I found it interesting that 106 school districts out of 422 passed a referenda here in 2022. So 25% of all school districts passed a referendum question in 2022. I thought that was pretty interesting there. So altogether, about the same thing, 4 out of 5 referendum passed throughout 2022. So I took a quote from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. I gave you guys 2 articles, and one of those quotes in the Wisconsin Policy Forum's report said that school district referenda have remained strong in even-numbered years with either fall midterm or presidential elections. So just some information there to put in your back pocket and think about that. Thanks, Sean. So there's 2 types, again, there's 2 types of referenda questions a school district can ask. One is to issue debt, and that's to do a capital project. Another one is to do an operating referendum. So an operating referendum can either be short-term help, so if we get $10,000 in funding per student, whatever that amount that generates, we might ask for, I'll just throw a number out there, an extra $3 million. And that could either be for a 5-year period or for an indefinite amount of time. So that's a recurring or a non-recurring referendum. And throughout the state, when you look at the history and the recent results here, most all of them have been passing. So 76 operating referenda passed in 2022,
which brought in an additional $506 million in funding. And then for issuance of debt or, capital building projects, 57 capital projects were approved in 2022, and that brought in an additional $2.1 billion, which is the largest amount since the year 2000. So I'll share just real quickly here. I'm going to walk back up here. Some of the results here. So this exhibit here comes from Baird. So they kind of break this down here, and I'll walk up to the screen here real quickly. I'll point to these bar charts here. So the top bar chart here is the issuance of debt. So that's a capital project to build something or to renovate something. 82.1% of those passed this past fall. This middle bar here is a non-recurring referendum, so that's asking for money in a temporary sense, and 3 out of 4 of those, 75% passed. And then for recurring referendums, that's the ask for an increase on the revenue limit forever. Almost 4 out of 5 of those passed here. So this exhibit just kind of speaks to the school district referendum that took place here. You can see in a graph where those occurred and where they passed. But by and large, they were successful. So this is just really an update. I don't know if you might have any questions on the information, but these votes did take place, so I thought it'd be a good time to talk about this and just point towards the results here. So that's it.
Timing as we're headed that direction.
Might be. So I guess one other thing I'll point out is that some information came out today. The State Department of Administration projected that there's a $6.6 billion projected surplus of $6.6 billion. And with that money, I'm just kind of interested when the next biennial budget gets written, how that money might be used, because at the end of the day, those are our tax dollars. And I think typically you'd find, looking at our history of school districts since revenue limits were imposed, is that there's always been some type of increase, $100, $200. Some years it's been almost as much as $300. But 6 out of the last 8 years, that number has been 0. So school districts have kind of been squeezed out of the biennial budget process. And I think that having that money, and there's 5 major pots of funding that state government is responsible for, the biggest one being K-12 in terms of dollars, that I think you'll see that in these. I'll share one more quote here. This is also from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. The successful referenda to exceed state-imposed property tax and school revenue limits confirm the growing importance of these ballot measures and suggest they could become a long-term feature of the state's political landscape. I think that our elected officials should take their responsibilities and say it's their responsibility to increase the funding. They are given the money to do that, to take the money and to sit on it and say, you guys just vote on your own, I don't think is the right. History would say the majority of the time they haven't gone that route. If you're going to take the money from the people, spend it accordingly based on your priorities. And I hope one of their priorities is K-12 education here. So as we move forward, I know that the Joint Finance Committee will begin to travel the state and have hearings. I'll make plans to go. Sean, maybe you might want to come with one more time, share some thoughts with them.
Looks eager.
So we've testified in front of the Joint Finance Committee before. Tom has done it at one of the, I think were you in West Allis when they were in West Allis? I can't remember where you were. We've also traveled to the Capitol to testify in front of the Joint Finance Committee because we have a good story to tell. We are wise stewards of the taxpayer dollar. We have very low property taxes in this district, and so it's not unreasonable for us to ask for one revenue cap relief, and then also some additional funds. So we will definitely do that, but that's probably not until March. So the governor will propose his budget in February, and then the state legislature will start to work on that at the end of February, early March, in the Joint Finance Committee. That's their responsibility, and like Tom said, they'll travel around the state, hold several hearings. So that's the time where it's budget season, and then we'll join.
Can you do can they just, when you say give more money, can they just give it to the lowest, or do they have to give it across the board?
Yep, they could. So the low revenue ceiling, as they call it, at $10,000, they could adjust that. So when I first started here, that number was 9,200, and we stayed at 9,200 for a couple of years, and then I went to 9,400, then 9,700, and then 10,000. So they've lifted the floor up. Absent any other action, that's what I would hope that they would consider.
Does that put the money on us as the taxpayers of the community or on the state?
It will go both ways. So that $10,000 number is going to be shared by the state and the property taxpayers. So it's about 50-50.
You mentioned that $6 billion that they have extra. Is that, how do we get that?
Through the state legislator. Sean, I don't know, do you want to?
So how does that, do we have like, we know we got this. If you did this, we could get this.
Yeah.
And does that money, would that money have to go equally throughout all the schools, or can that get distributed amongst the lowest?
They could do it a couple different ways. One is that they could distribute that money through, like, if you'll recall, there's 85% or 90% of all of our money comes through that $10,000 per member revenue limit, or the $742 per pupil categorical aids. So we make about $11,000 per student to fund our operations. If the state wanted to leave property taxes flat, they would leave the per member revenue limit alone, because when you move that number, then you're moving property taxes up as well. So then they could give that money out as per student categorical aids, that $742. They could add 100 or 200 to that. Now, I'd say the problem with that is that if they gave us, they're also giving every other school district that same amount. So it's like, we're still competing with these people. We're trying to close this funding gap. That gap still remains. So thanks for the money, but we're trying to survive in this fixed economy of there's only so many math teachers out there that when everybody else gets the same increase, it's like that, thank you, but not the perfect answer, not that there ever is one. They could also increase that by bringing up the per member revenue limit. So they say whatever your number is, if you're Elmbrook at 12,000 or you're Mukwonago at 10,000, add $200 to it. They're not on the hook for that whole 200. Don't quote me on these numbers, please, but if the number is that $200, if it's 50-50 split with our taxpayers and state government, then $100 will come from our residents and $100 will come from Madison. If you're getting $200 in Elmbrook, where you're negatively aided at the tertiary level, I'd say that maybe, again, I'm guessing on this, 160 of that 200 is going to come from Elmbrook taxpayers, and only 40 will come from the state. They're not going to fund it that much because their property wealth per student is much higher. So that, I guess, they'll have a couple choices here on how they can give the money. Because again, it's going to affect property taxes one way or the other, and how much they're responsible for. If they put $200 onto that $742 amount, they got to pay all of it. If they put $200 on that per member revenue limit, they're only responsible for a part of it. So we'll see how it gets handled here.
So the only way for us to increase our, sorry, what's the right word? We want to be able to pay more.
Yep.
The only way to increase that is to raise our $10,000
Yep.
level.
So if they said, hey, anybody who's under 10,200, move to 10,200 in the 23-24 school year, and then go to 10,400 the year after that, we would then begin to start catching up.
But then everybody else doesn't do that. They only pick the lowest.
They could do it that way.
If Elmbrook's at 14,000 or 12,000 or whatever, they don't get to raise theirs, or they do get to raise
If they choose to write the budget that way, and they have in years past, I guess, I don't want to, I guess my only job is to advocate for Mukwonago. So
how do we make ourselves more competitive? We need to get more money.
Yep.
How do we make it so that they don't, that they can't do it too? Because if they have the option to do it, then we're all just raising the price.
So then we're gonna wanna lobby our state legislators, one, to increase that low revenue cap. So that's one, and that has happened in the past. And then the other way would be for us to pass on an operating referendum. And so that, for example, Kettle Moraine, 3 years ago, passed an operating referendum that they were near us, they were closer to us, and now they've jumped quite a bit ahead because they passed that operating referendum in their district.
What did they go, do you know what they went from and to?
Tom, can you help? I'll get you that, I
It's
don't.
not that important, just curious. If you
But it's a good example for us to use. The first time they failed, they went back out a second time and it passed. And it's helped them a great deal.
Yeah.
All right.
Ready for the buildings and ground?
Sure. Andy?
Okay, I'm on. So I just gave you guys an update of what we'd been doing. There was a few things that came back from the tours that were done recently, and so I just felt that it might be best that I kind of give you a synopsis of more of what I've been doing with my team over the last few months since school started. As you well know, we have the Eagleville Pavilion that's been a project for some time. We did drill our first holes today. So that,
Bet that was fun.
that was, well, yeah, it was. It's just good to see that we have progress going. On the modular classroom, just so everybody's on the same page, when we first talked about this, we had the opportunity to possibly buy a used modular building, and for that, it was looked at as this would be the sole vendor to go with. That vendor's come back and said that we should be looking at a new building because it would be more economical than the used building. Looking at the dollars that we're going to be spending, I felt it might be best that we go to an RFP at this point and try to get a couple other vendors involved. So I'm not trying to slow the process. I'm looking to get the best project for the district by going to an RFP. So we'll be working on that in the next month to get drafted. I am sending out an RFP right now for HVAC controls. So we have a couple different platforms that we use in the district for controlling our buildings. Some are standalone, like this building is standalone, Eagleville standalone. The high school and section are on a program called Niagara. That's a program that can go and actually overlay what we have in our buildings and allow it to run that, as well as then we can control our lighting and everything else from that too. So that's what we're moving towards, would like to move towards. We currently have Train software in the rest of our buildings, and that hadn't been supported real well from their company. In the past years, they do have a new salesperson that's been working with me a little bit more. But we are moving to try and get everything in one setting. So I currently work with AES as our controls company. It was Masters when we had started the high school project. We had since switched. And then ACS, which is Andy Hoppy and his crew, they're our actual mechanical contractor. So they'll be doing more of the controls, as well as then AES currently is the one that designs all the controls. By putting it out to an RFP, it's not to say that they're going to be our sole contractors. It could be anybody, but is to also make sure that we're not getting overcharged for the things that they're providing currently. So I'd like to keep my working relationship with them, but if it would change to somebody else, that's what the RFP is in place for. At Big Bend, we've had a little problem with some backups in the basement. We foregoed a problem during the tornado and had it the next day, so that was but anyways, what we did come to find is
somehow during one of our clean out attempts in the past, a plumbing snake must have come detached from the rest of the snake when it came out and got lodged in the pipes through a P-trap, we think. And so we're currently working with a couple companies to get that rectified. We're probably gonna have to open up the floor and cut a pipe to get that out. But that's catching things as it goes through and creating more backups. So we are working on that. Just something that's been hit a little bit hard on us this year is we've replaced already 3 water heaters. And a water heater being 100 gallons in most of our schools is, with the time of labor and everything else, is roughly $12,000 a piece. So,
What?
and hot water heaters are not lasting 20 years like they used to. Some of these are 8 years old and we're replacing them. We do soften our water. We check that regularly. So we're doing a lot of preventative things to try and make these things last longer. It's just things in itself that are not lasting. So just so you're aware, I mean, there's a lot. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the things that I have to replace within a year, but it's kind of uncommon to be replacing 3 hot water heaters in 1 year.
Why are they so expensive? $12,000.
Yeah,
I feel like you can get a tankless for
a hot water heater right now. We're doing a like for a like, and we haven't changed up our systems, but you have our hot water systems in most of our schools have a circulating pump, so they're pushing hot water constantly through the building. We used to have large storage tanks in most of our buildings. Now we're just using the tanks of the hot water heaters themselves. That was, for the schools that don't have that, that was kind of a decision prior to me. But in that, yeah, prices have just gone up a lot.
What were they 3 years ago?
Probably $3 grand less. But roofing's gone up quite a bit too lately.
Don't judge.
I do it, I'm just saying. I had to change my numbers on that too. Let's talk to high school, I can tell you. Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna get personal here.
Yeah, I'm just using a like-for-like scenario. In 2 weeks, let's see here. Oh, so we did put a new parking lot in at Prairie View to help with that overflow issue. So the asphalt went down last week. Fence went up over the weekend, and they finished that up today. They should be putting lines down in the next day or 2. So, I mean, that's pretty much a complete project, and it took 2.5 weeks to do.
Awesome.
So,
Solid. That was very
I'm starting to put out my invitations to principals, so every year I meet with them in December-ish, January, so we've been pushing it up, but so I'll sit down with them for any improvements they feel they need in their buildings. I put that on a plan. Our plan is set with a standard as to if it's a safety issue, if it's a maintenance issue, and it's prorated in a scheme of 1 through 7, and then A, B, C, D. So it gives it a ranking as to where it should be done. And then we look at what we have left over in operating budget at the end of the year for what we can do, as well as what do we need to put into the next year's budget, or what can we get out of Fund 46? What do we have a 10-year capital plan? So a lot of different moving parts that play into that. So we'll be, like I said, I'll have most of that done by Christmas break. I know there's been a lot of questions too about overcrowding and what we can do to help with that. Just like an example, this summer at Big Ben, we took 3 of the music rooms, the small music rooms that were not being used for anything, and turned them into small offices and put a door on the end of the hallway so that it would kind of create a noise buffer per se. So we are looking at any means that we can do to create little spaces for the small groups to meet in our buildings, but a lot of this is gonna have to be driven off the facility study that we're doing and where we can increase our buildings or change capabilities. And then as far as positions, We were really short at Prairie View. So Prairie View, we have 2 nighttime positions. One resigned right at the beginning of the school year. Well, they both resigned right at the beginning of the school year. And so we've been filling that in with overtime as well as subs that we might have. And then even Ron Pond, who's my second shift operations person, he's been filling in a lot of places as well. We've done hiring fairs. We've done Indeed is probably our biggest helper. And you've probably heard this through Steven's reports as well, but it's just finding the right person for the right job when it comes to custodial. Not everybody likes cleaning up bathrooms and things of that nature, so we do with what we have. I don't have it in my report, but something that we are looking at doing, I have 2 people within the district that are willing to do this, is we're looking at making a 3rd shift at the high school. By doing that, I feel, as well as Ron Pond, we feel that we're gonna be able to clean areas like the locker rooms, the gyms, and bathrooms that are always busy with people during 2nd shift on 3rd shift. We'll be able to sub in some areas that we might not have somebody to work in by having somebody there on 3rd shift. Going into winter, it'll help with some of the snow removal that we need to do in the middle of the night. And then we're looking at some other mechanical devices, possibly an autonomous scrubber that could go around and do a lot of work in the building, but you'd need to have a person there with the autonomous scrubber. You can't just, hey, go do your thing and we'll see you in 6 hours. So a lot of different moving parts on that, but a direction that we are looking to go. You guys have any questions for me on anything with buildings and grounds?
Tankless water heaters possible?
It's possible. It's,
Just curious.
I really just need to get an engineer involved in that. And to your question, like at the high school, we have 2 separate loops there. We have the loop from 1972 and we have a loop on the west end from 1993. And it was kind of my thought is how could we loop those 2 together so that we could just have 2 hot water heaters instead of 4 hot water heaters? I was told that would be not an engineer nightmare, but it would take a lot of money in engineering to make that happen. So I'm putting that on the back burner a little bit. But I am also looking at, we do have a large storage tank on the 72 side, which is where the central kitchen is at. And there's a possibility of heating with our boiler system, the water, the domestic water. So I'm looking into that as well. So looking at multiple different things that could make us work more efficient.
You have to say, you have to say that.
Which ones are you referring to? Because I didn't see that in your email. So Parkview Middle School, we did a sound test there through our environmental agency roughly 4 years ago. I've provided the documentation to the superintendent on that. We offer hearing testing to all our building and ground staff, as well as I've offered it to the music staff. That teacher at Big Ben, or at Parkview has gone to the hearing testing. We also offer hearing protection. It's their choice to take it or not. So the one option right now at Parkview that maybe could fix some things there would be to put something on the flooring. But I don't know about putting carpeting on the flooring because, yeah, all the saliva is gonna create a problem. Right. Yeah, so, and then having a higher ceiling might help a little bit too. So do we take out the drop ceiling? We might gain a little space there. I was also gonna look at, do we flip-flop rooms? So the room on the other side of the hallway is where the stage used to be. And I know back when I went to school there, that's the side band was on as well, but I think there might be possible more absorption over there we could look at. But just so you know up front, we were identified with a problem when Luke took over as principal there, so we had done some testing in advance. We were within normal operating levels for the school day. There were peaks at times, but for the overall time frame for that, anybody teaching or being in that environment for 8 hours, we did not exceed OSHA's levels.
I just think we should do more, 'cause it's
Yeah.
really loud in there. We have those dampeners inside the gym, that are just on the ceiling, any way we could use some of those and put them like on the walls to help out too?
We certainly can look into that.
Anything else for Andy? Okay, health clinic?
All right. I sent out a survey to our staff. I sent this to those that are on our health insurance here late last month, and I kept the survey open till November 15th. So this went out to 364 of our staff that are on our health plan. And I'm going to share with you now the results from that. So of the 364 surveys, we sent 281 responded. So 70, a little more than 3 out of 4 folks responded to it. The first thing that we asked was if the district builds a primary care clinic, and I guess let me just back up a second here. I shared with you all the survey itself so you could see it, how we led into this here. When we've introduced the concepts of different types of health care that we can offer, there's being fully insured, there's being self-insured, there's a clinic that could be in place. A clinic could work in either model, and there's a lot of, based on the information we were sharing, we shared a video with our staff to help explain this in depth that they could watch on their own time, and that produced a lot of questions. When I asked the questions about the survey, about the clinic, and I surveyed staff, I just wanted to boil this down to the clinic. How do you feel about a clinic? Don't worry about like whatever the health plan is behind it. If we offered you a clinic, how likely, how comfortable would you be, would your family be, and would you consider it? So the questions that I shared, I encourage you to please read those so you can kind of see the information that we shared about how the clinic would work and how it would benefit our people should we go this route. First question we asked is, if the district builds a primary care clinic, I will definitely consider using it. The people that said strongly agree or somewhat agree totaled 66%. So if we also include the people who indicated that they weren't sure, which is another 20%, and I'd call those people who are unsure at least open to the idea of using it, 86% of our people are open to using a clinic. So I interpret these results as our employees themselves would be open and willing to use a clinic if we went this route. Next question was, if the district builds a primary care clinic, my family members will definitely consider using it. So 22% of our people said they strongly agree. Another 24% said they somewhat agree. Another 26% said they're not sure, but they're not saying no, they're just not sure. So altogether, 73% of our people are open to having their family members use the clinic. Okay? So again, I am interpreting these results as it's definitely a potential, it's a possibility. It's not being shot down entirely. Not even close. Next question was, I prefer the clinic to be located, and they were given 4 options: at a location separate from a district campus, at Mukwonago High School, or I don't care as long as it's close to my workplace. And we also gave people the chance to choose other and then indicate what they were looking for there. But the 47% of all people said, I don't care as long as it's close. And another 9% said they like it at Mukwonago High School. So 56% of our people ultimately said the high school or somewhere else, just so long as it's close by. All right. The last question that we then asked is, which of the following best describes your concerns about protecting patient privacy? There was 3 options. I trust MASD and the clinic staff to protect patient privacy. I have a few concerns about the protection of patient privacy. And then last, I don't trust MASD and the clinic staff to protect patient privacy. And 92% of our staff either said they trust the district and the staff to protect their medical information, or they just had a few concerns. So again, I think people are indicating that they're comfortable with the concept of a clinic. In addition to these, then we also gave an open-ended response where they could indicate whatever it is that they were had questions or concerns about. So we've gathered those over 14 pages worth of comments. What we're doing right now is we're taking all those comments, and there's a lot of the same questions that are asked over and over. So we're dropping these questions into themes or groups that are similar, and then we're going to go make it a open-ended FAQ. And provide a paragraph explanation about what it is here. But at this time, I think based on these results here, is that our staff is open to this, and that this is an idea that's still on the table. What we're doing as we move forward here between now and the December 19th meeting is I'm working with Sarah and Megan, you might remember them, those are our health consultants, about the clinic and how this would work, either if we stay fully insured as we are now or self-insured, if that's the route we go. So we'll ultimately go out to market in February and March, and everybody who provide either a fully insured vendor or a self-insured vendor, they're going to want to see as much data as possible to see how are your high claimants, how's your overall plan doing. So we could go out to bid now, but we're not going to get we'll get better numbers and more accurate numbers if we wait. So we kind of play this waiting game, but at the meantime, if we're going to build the clinic, we got to start moving on this thing now, because if we wanted to get it ready to go July 1st, we want to start going after the new year, no later than that. So the question I gave to our consultants is whether we go become a self-funded district or we stay fully insured. If we build this clinic, are we going to use it to our benefit and to our people's benefits? And their answer is yes. So ultimately what we're going to spend the next couple weeks doing prior to the December 19th meeting is analyze the two major routes, fully insured or self-insured, and then I will come back on the 19th and tell you, I'll give you a recommendation to move forward or not. You might recall that we've already set the money aside to build this out. So we would, the money's already been earmarked, it's there. It's just making sure that this is the proper investment, and that's what we're taking the time right now to make sure that this investment is going to be a good one. So I share these results with you. Do you guys have any questions about any of this information?
I don't.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
We need to move into,
So I think before we go to closed session, let's circle back to the 4K discussion. So that was letter D, 4K community partners. So Sean's going to jump in here on this conversation here. So I guess we just want to kind of brief you on where we're at and where we think we're going to go here. And Sean,
You want to start with the contracts first, or?
Yeah, so at this time every year, we basically come back and we make sure that we're still moving down the correct path, that you guys don't have any concerns, that we would typically issue our contracts to our 4K community partners. So right now, working with the Y, Kids Connection, Little Lambs, and VCDC and Vernon. And we would issue these contracts to say this is for the 23-24 school year. We currently pay them $2,800 per student. We would pay at least that amount for 23-24, and we'd settle that amount here later on once we probably know the state biennial budget. They would send those signed contracts back sometime in early January, and then we would take that information to our 4K info night at Clarendon, and to all the parents who will have a 4K student next year, we'd communicate, these are our partners, here's your choices, you're gonna pick your top 3 in order, and then we'll do our best to kind of place everybody everywhere. So as we move down that path, I think there's obviously a larger 4K conversation that we're ultimately trying to have, but that's where we typically are in November. So I think going forward right now, we've hired our the 4K teacher at Kids Connection is now an MASD employee. So we're revising our contract to explicitly call that out. In the past, it's always been the responsibility of the 4K operator to provide the teachers. We're going to make sure that we're cognizant of that in the event that we need to hire the 4K teachers were prepared to do that, and that it's explicitly spelled out in the contract how we're gonna handle that. I do think, I guess I'll say that I think we might need to delay the 4K info night if there's a potential for it anyways. I'll say it like that. We just want to make sure that we have enough time to write this contract the right way, that the operators have enough time to review it, and that all parties are comfortable as we move forward into the next school year. Sean, what else?
Right, so as I told you at the last school board meeting, we did meet with our 4K directors in early November, and we did have a conversation with them to let them know that the school board would be discussing the future of 4K in the district. And that was being driven by our facility study, but also by some of our competitors, such as St. John's Lutheran Church and School here in Mukwonago that was offering full-day 4K and also possibly half-day 3K. And so we told them in the next couple of months we would be having that conversation. It's really a lengthier conversation as well, but that we would also be surveying our parents. And so Stephanie had a conversation with the Learning Committee earlier this month, and we do have a survey to send to this year's 4K parents and then also the 4K parents from the last 2 years. And we'll ask them questions about, hey, if we had full day 4K, would you be interested if we had it when your child was in 4K or if you have younger children? And we'll ask them a number of questions about our 4K program. And so the community partners are aware of that. I hope to have a more in-depth conversation with the entire board about the future of 4K at our next board work session, which I hope will be December 19th, which is our board meeting, prior to the board meeting. We also have started conversations with our community partners about expanding that concept, and I talked to the personnel committee about this as well, about us hiring the 4K teachers for our community partners. Like Tom said, we did that at Kids Connection, but maybe we're going to need to do that at the YMCA, maybe at VCDC. We talked also about the possibility that we may have more 4K in our buildings, in our schools. So they're aware of that. Doesn't mean that they're out. We still could continue to grow our 4K program within our schools, but also have that 4K community partner option. But we don't really know what that looks like. But some of those things are going to be driven by that survey and also by the board and your vision on what 4K should look like.
How does the funding work when we provide the teacher?
So then it will be less funding for the 4K community partner, and I don't have the, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, so like the 2,800 that we provide per student, we would have to reduce that amount accordingly. Not trying to create any type of financial gain towards one side or the other, just what's the break-even situation there? Right. Just trying to get there.
Yep, it'd be a win-win for both. That's what we would hope for. So,
is there one principal for the 4K program, or like the Big Bend 4K report to Sean Waller?
Right. So
where do these other people report then that are at the partner district?
That's a great question. So Colleen Hoyne, who is the principal at Eagleville, she is our 4K coordinator or director, and so she supervises the community partner sites.
Okay.
She visits them, she works with those teachers, works with improving the quality of the program, that kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
And I just said, Dale, real quick, one more, and that Mary Cash, who is the owner of Little Lambs here in the village of Mukwonago, she's going to retire, and so that 4K partner is up for sale right now. So I don't know that we'll be continuing our partnership with them. Really is dependent upon the need and who she sells it to. So that's up in the air right now.
Dale?
I was gonna ask the survey question, you can ask parents. Is that asking if you're gonna be full-time in our school district or with our partners?
So I haven't seen the questions, and I know Cherry and Erica, I don't know if Stephanie shared questions with you, but when we talked to her today at the director meeting, she said that she was going, I think that they'll ask their interest in full-day 4K, whether it's in our buildings or with the community partners. But I'll get clarification on that. Did you guys have other questions about 4K? There's no doubt that there are some changes on the horizon, also with the curriculum, and so I know we're going to be working on that as well. And Stephanie will fill you in on that as we move forward.
Okay.
All right.
Session?
Did we miss anything?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think we're good. All right, I think we're good to go close session now.
All right, make a motion that we move to closed session.
Second?
All in favor? Or do we have to roll call?
Yeah, roll call that.
Carolyn?
Here.
Vito?
Here.
Joel?
Aye. Here.